All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started with our panel here on trends in healthcare. I'm Steve Papermaster, CEO of Nano International, and we appreciate everybody joining us here for a lively discussion on trends in healthcare, which is one of the most dynamic fields in the world today. We have a fabulous panel. I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves here in a moment briefly, and then we're just going to get started on some of the key topics. I will say that having personally been here at FII since the first session in 2017, active in a region, I'm really impressed with the energy and the dynamism that we have seen here at this session, and this topic in healthcare on an annual basis has done nothing but skyrocketed. So I think emblematic of our times. But Travis, if you'll just get us started, we'll have our panel introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll jump into a few quick questions.
Happy to do so. Hi everyone, I'm Travis Dalton, Executive Vice President, General Manager of Oracle Health. I was 22 years with Cerner Corporation. We sold the company to Oracle for $28.3 billion. I led that effort, and now I'm with Oracle, leading all of our global healthcare assets around the world. So it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Irene Hong, and I'm with CEC Capital. We're an investment bank based in China. We cover the sectors of technology, consumer, and healthcare, and I'm the healthcare partner. We work on China deals, but we also do cross-border. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nisa Leung of Qiming Ventures. We're one of the largest healthcare investors in Asia. We've invested in 540 companies, of which 210 are in healthcare. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Christopher Merrill. I'm the chairman and co-founder of Harrison Street. We are an education and healthcare real estate investor, both in the U.S. and Europe. We currently manage about $60 billion in assets.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shamsheer. I'm a radiologist by training. I'm the chairman and founder of Burjeel Holdings, which is a listed company out of Abu Dhabi stock market. We do different concepts of healthcare, including pre-hospital care, hospitals, and pharmaceuticals. Thank you.
Great panel. My background briefly, several decades in technology and healthcare. Nano International is a leader in metabolic health. We've got drugs commercializing as well as our digital health platform. I was a cabinet member in the U.S. White House under George W. Bush for both terms. I co-chaired with our team the completion of the Human Genome Project, a national nanotechnology initiative, and all of our roadmaps under the National Institute of Health, NIH, FDA, and all of the assets under our national labs. And have been very active in the region here, in the kingdom, and in the region with a lot of these crossover initiatives. And that leads me into one of the first topics I want to talk about here, which is when we look at healthcare to a lot of consumers in the world today, that from a consumerization standpoint, we're seeing categories of what were quieter drugs, if you will, become part of everyday either conversation or life. Areas like Ozempic, Wegovy, where we've had clinical drugs for obesity and or diabetes cross over, whether they were off-label, off-usage, or otherwise, and seeing that become really a sweeping global, not just marketplace, but trend. And I'd like to get some comments from our panelists on this. And Nisa, if you would start us off on that, because I know you have very strong portfolio in a number of different drug development in China, but also we're touching global markets. What's your perspective on the globalization of this trend of driving this category, deep clinical, into kind of everyday life?
Well, I think, first of all, one of our portfolio companies is the largest insulin company in China. And they have manufacturing capacity of 50% of all the insulin globally. So, and selling to 35 countries worldwide. So I do believe that, it's great to see the success of Ozempic. In fact, 6-7 years ago, we started talking about, companies Novo, Eli Lilly developing GLP-1, and we're telling our, CEO, and the CEO actually has been developing a GLP-1. In fact, he has an oral in the portfolio. And, but, it's really only recently through the phase 3 clinical data that we could see there's such a big impact for obesity. So, so then it went straight into off-label consumer and whatnot. So it's a great success, and we would love to see continuously if we could develop more drugs. Perhaps, we talked about earlier today whether or not there could be some other drugs that we could, derive for treatment for some other areas, perhaps in neuro or whatnot, and other areas. But what's really exciting is there's so much new modality. So many new modalities, gene cell therapy, antibody, and of course the convergence of digital and health, that we're seeing a lot of excitement and a lot of potential unmet medical needs being resolved. So it's very exciting area.
Yeah, exciting. Irene, if
Yeah.
you please add.
I was going to say something that may be obvious, but I don't think we think about it, is that the ability to access information, we're talking about from a consumer and consumers taking Ozempic. I think that a lot of it is also that right now the access to information is much different than it was decades back. So I think that in terms of consumers actually thinking about their own health and their own wellness, I think consumer health and wellness is a sector that we see growing, and with trends in terms of functional medicine, functional foods. But I also, I think that with the increasing costs of healthcare and the more difficult access, I think people are thinking about things in terms of earlier and more preventative medicine than acute sick. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
With that move towards preventative medicine and consumerization of these drugs, like we're talking about with this category, that tends to place the desire to have information about one's own health in your own hands.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's a classic clinical record or emergency use record, which we've seen in COVID or otherwise, it seems to be transforming where people are going to, both at the sovereign level as well as the individual level. Travis, you guys have been a leader for years with Cerner, now Oracle Cerner. Would love to get your perspective on where is this going, and how do you see that happening, maybe activity in your space?
Yeah, happy to. I think healthcare is ready for change. It's notoriously slow to adopt, as you may know. It's highly complex. But we're in a moment where there's more data than there's ever been. You have a readiness for change and a willingness at a provider level. And there's also kind of this impetus where technology can now enter in a meaningful way. And so, we look at the market, and I've been in, 10 countries and seen maybe 100 clients in the last 6 months. And they all have similar needs, interestingly, at all over the globe. So it's, the consumer demands have increased dramatically, and I think COVID exacerbated that. More technology, more data, better transparency at my fingertips. But the operating environment, and the good doctor can talk to this when I'm in a moment, is harder than it's ever been. So regulation high, operating expenses are up. It's difficult to operate. So you mix that up, and where are we? To me, we're at a moment, because all that's converging, and I think the moment is you have the opportunity for systemness and standards like you've never had. The opportunity to do verticalized healthcare in a way that's very unique and interesting. So you look at lab, why do labs have to be done inside of hospital systems? Why couldn't you verticalize that? It's cheaper, it's faster, it's rote, it can be automated and done more quickly. There's things like that. And then ultimately, we've digitized the record. And so now we can put health data and analytics on top of that. And so I think that the ability to do analytics, I do think that AI will have a major impact as it relates to predictive care and wellness versus otherwise. And so I think we're thinking at it as a data layer more so than a clinical layer. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it on, is our view on it is that we should be a platform for innovation, not a clinical system. So our goal really is to create a platform that has API layer on top of it.
Yep.
And then there would be massive amount of innovation that we're opening up the ecosystem versus locking it down. And so our philosophy is we think we have a moral responsibility, actually, but it's also a business opportunity to open that ecosystem and be a platform player.
That's great. And as a platform player and with laboratories, you made a very important point, which is the laboratories, why are they in hospitals? Why do they have to be clinical settings.
Correct.
Why can't those move really much more into an open environment, which
Yeah.
we're starting to see? Chris, if you would, I know that's an area I believe you guys are active with in a marketplace. If you'd address what you think some of the trends are in externalizing laboratories, research facilities, on certainly in the U.S. but on a global basis.
Sure. No, happy to. That's where where we play in the healthcare is in that facilities, and we're looking for asset classes that have these strong underlying demand drivers. So when you think about drug development, the amount of money that's going into pain management, wellness, so life science, creating life science facilities, working with our universities to create these facilities has seen tremendous demand. At the same time, the move outpatient, with technology advancements, the move to the outpatient setting, the need for medical office buildings. So again, that's really another area that we play in. And then just what we're talking about in terms of the digitalization of records, the need for data centers. And so what we've tried to do as a firm is focus on assets that have these sort of need-based fundamentals, these strong demand drivers, where you can sort of look for the next 20 years and say, there's a growing need. And additionally, what we also do is we spend a lot of our time in the senior care space, in the senior housing space, because with people living longer, memory health issues, that need for assisted and memory care. So where we like to play in the healthcare space is that underlying infrastructure, facilities for all these great companies.
Elderly care is one of the areas that you're playing in. We talked about that going. I want to address maybe we're at FII, obviously, here in Riyadh. Vision 2030 and a lot of the healthcare transformation, which is a part of that, both in the kingdom here, but also in the region, is a very dynamic region. Bashar, would you share your perspective? I think this is an area of your expertise that would be great to get some insight from.
I think post-COVID, the refocus on healthcare has taken a very big center stage. So everywhere you go, the first 5 subjects will have healthcare in the discussion. And I think, like everywhere, the challenge is the rising cost. We need new models. We need to focus on technology, data, and people to solve the challenges. So for us, even the real estate, if you take, we believe that more shift of patients from the hospitals into the communities are happening. So probably more primary care networks. We've started a physiotherapy concept inside a gym where people can have quick access, reducing the cost. We are building 60 of them. We are building ambulatory surgical centers. So instead of having these big mammoth structures, we are trying to be amongst the communities, use technology, data, and I like what Travis said, the verticalization of hospitals. We have labs. We have a healthcare that focuses only on oil and gas, which is like onshore, offshore clinics and stuff like that. So the needs are growing. The cost is increasing. The insurance companies are looking out for new products. I think there's a good time to talk more about healthcare.
How do you see that progressing in a region here, moving on into even further, not just elderly care, but home health care, the extension of the actual provision of the health care?
We talk a lot
into the
about
home.
longevity. We talk about age reversals, reversing the time. But home care is the most disruptive model that needs to embrace a lot more stronger educational activities in the region, because the culture here is that you go and see a super specialist when you have a headache. You want to see a neurologist, unlike the US where the family practice medicine picks a very important role. So I think the home care with digitization and the new teleradiology and stuff like that, I think home care is going to help a lot, and that's a future to focus on as well. But I think that's a very important area to focus on.
That's a great pivot. In Asia, in China, and the region, how is home health care as a trend playing out? Is that a fairly fundamental transformation, both in facilities and provision of health care? I also want to touch on that is where and how are we with some of the labor shortages in nursing and physicians?
It's interesting because for the longest time, I've resisted investing in elderly home. The reason is, if you have good margin, it means you're not providing enough services. You don't have enough labor. If you have more labor taking care of the elderly, you're squeezing your margin. So it's not something that I would prefer to invest. I would rather invest in technology, drugs that could help elderly. But in China, it's a little bit different because when you see in China, people prefer to stay and live with their parents or grandparents. So, instead of investing in elderly home, can we be investing in services that can reach all these elderly at home? So we did that, and one of our companies is now the largest elderly home care company in Shanghai and expanding nationwide, and they're growing like hotcakes. So we're partnering with a lot of digital health companies, with a lot of nurses. We have nurses, doctors going into the homes. And I think every country has a different culture, how they, how they would be taking care of the elderly. So depending on the culture, local culture, we would be investing, based on that. So I think that's very important.
So that may lead into new categories of therapeutics, new categories of drugs, as well as combination digital
Home
therapy.
dialysis, a lot of other.
Yes. Irene, what do you see from an investment thesis standpoint there? Where do you see new opportunities?
So we also see, actually in terms of all the different models, in terms of health, elderly care, there are platforms where there's nurses are being sent to homes. There's also models where caregivers are being sent to hospitals to help the families. I think there's one statistic, everyone talks about the elderly population, but just for the people that haven't really looked at the data, right now in China, it's 1 in 5 that are elderly over 60. By 2030, it's going to be 1 in 4, okay? By 2040, it's 1 in 3. And then by 2080, it's 1 in 2, okay? There's absolutely no way that in terms of the pressures that's going to be on the system, so, I think, China and all regions are looking for, with the price control issues, they're looking for all sorts of ways to cut costs through innovation, digitization. So I think that every model with regards to elderly care will be in play. I think that also China has the one-child policy, so now we have one person taking care of 4 people. And from 2016, there were, I think there was like, if I'm not mistaken, it was something like 18 million babies born, and that this last year it's 8 million. Okay, so we halved the number of newborns in 6 or 7 years. Okay, so this is the pressures that are going to occur in the near future are actually it's going to be a perfect storm. And so the only way to do this is through innovation, scale. There's just going to there's no other way. And so I think that part of AI and digitization and everything that's going on, the pressures are mounting.
The pressures are mounting. AI is obviously a common theme. I think that even FII here, possibly the only thing, and I might have missed it, that we haven't had a session on is how AI is going to change that ice cream stand over there. But that may be tomorrow, and we'll check. Travis, you have a firm hand on kind of the engines of innovation and what's going on with a lot of the technology driving this. With AI, which has both been around for a long time, like a lot of technology trends, and yet it's reborn again, generative AI and AI, and yet it's yet another era combined with GPUs and a tremendous new capability engineered down to the chip level.
Yeah.
How does that play out in terms of not just powering traditional healthcare institutions, but driving new development of services that we've been talking about, new areas of health that's delivered by AI and/or integrated systems?
Yeah, I think you'll see a couple things. I mean, so when I look at the markets, it's most of our clients, as I said, are trying to do a similar thing. We have 20,000 clients around the globe, and you look at it, and they all have legacy technology and tech debt. So the first thing is you almost have to move up this ladder to consume more advanced technology. So number one is we've been talking about cost. There's a massive opportunity here to use cloud technology to drive out operating costs of the system, to invest in meaningful technologies like AI, like drugs, like clinical trials, time to market, et cetera. So I think there's a base layer of work that has to happen. Beyond that, I mean, we see it as a huge opportunity. I mean, we have something we call the clinical digital assistant, which is an AI-based tool. Our view on it is, I hate artificial piece of it. I call it implied intelligence. And so you can actually look at trends. You can start to look at language models. You can start to predict activities off of the data platform that I mentioned before. And now you're talking about wellness versus sick care. And so our view on it is that the sky's unlimited. Some will adopt it sooner rather than others. But I do think that we can actually really start to move beyond reactive approaches into proactive approaches. And we have clients that are using AI in interesting ways beyond just the care setting in their business systems. So you can start to look at case mix. You can start to predict the medications you need. You can start to map supply chain to demands. And so I think there's a real opportunity to transform the business of healthcare, which ultimately is goodness because then you can bring innovation into care as well. So I think it's game changing. I really do. As we mentioned about disruption, it's going to be the most disruptive thing we've seen in a really long time.
Well, we need the disruption because if you look at healthcare in a lot of these core areas, even with advancements that have happened, I know when I had the honor of being one of the group co-chairs of the Human Genome Project, and that was over 20 years ago, and when we were about 7 years into it, when we got down to what seemed like the last segment, that last segment kept moving. No matter how much further we moved, it was still out there. We didn't have even today's level of technology. So, and yet cracking that code, now we have CRISPR technology, we have gene editing technology, we have predictive analytics on that. We're into a whole new era. And yet that still has not translated into new cures. It hasn't translated into new therapeutics, even in areas of oncology. If you have a pancreatic tumor, if you have breast cancer, or prostate, others, other than certain advancements which have been significant, you're still not that far off of what the level of care was 30 or 40 or even 50 years ago. Sure. And from my perspective, this is where the opportunity in healthcare and the need is a screaming need to say, that is not okay. That cannot possibly be acceptable. Nobody can accept that. You can't watch every other industry grow and change at a different rate, and healthcare and care and developing cures not match up with that. So I think the greatest opportunity and challenge is taking a lot of these core trends we've talked about. But there's one area that I'd love to get into here with the panel that seems tough is because when you come down to it, you talk about devices and you talk about new levels of drugs and development, you have the regulatory angle, and the regulatory, which is important because we need to ensure collectively through our bodies, FDA in the U.S., EU medicines, in the CFDA in China, WHO and others, of course, that there are safe and effective development. And yet at the same time, that regulatory system has caused a perpetual backlog of 10, 15, 20 years. It cannot cost $3 to $5 billion to develop a new device and a drug. That doesn't make sense. So where can we take some of the trending in AI and new technology, clinical trials? For sure, I know you guys have a
So COVID has
clinical
taught
trials.
us the concept of repurposing. Normally what took years, took months, took weeks. And I think if the FDA, CDCs all come together, and I think we need a new script of regulations, because I think it's time that the pressure has to be on, because we have seen more off-label uses, and that is helping the humanity in a big way. So I think the regulations, as you said, it's highly regulated. I think it's time that we stop the policing, we give more entrepreneurship to the doctors, because I think the physicians are the best entrepreneurs because they take decisions every day. So I think that physician-led entrepreneurship has to be promoted. We can see more discoveries coming out. The disruption time is right. As Travis said, we need to disrupt now or it's going to be a burden on the people. The kind of obesity is getting picked up, the kind of cancers that are growing, the pediatric requirements, the very disturbing geopolitics. I think we are in it for a big trouble if we don't fix fast. I think we need to combine humanity with innovation, with digital, with new modes of treatment. We have 3D printing. We have a lot of stuff that needs to come down to reduce the cost as well.
Well, I would say with, when you talk about quality of care and innovation, and we were talking about elderly care, there's a lot of innovative ways that people are recognizing that the elderly, aging together actually allows them to live longer. And there was a lot of there's a lot of innovative things in terms of brain management, brain study, brain health, because people living longer, memory issues, very hard to take care of a loved one in a home that starts to have memory dementia issues. And so even during the pandemic, we saw the safety of these senior housing communities to be able to control these things. So I think there's a lot of innovation around how do you take care of the elderly, how do you create this environment where there is a excellent quality of life, where there is a demand, where it's not the old senior housing facility that one might think of, but really it's an active adult community. And it's a wonderful facility, and you have great operators that are using innovative methods to take care of people and pain management, et cetera.
And if we're coming up with new therapeutics and new drugs for dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative, to treat that in a new model, Irene, how do we do that?
No, I wanted to add one thing, which was, BioNTech was looking at vaccines very early on, right? And so with COVID, one thing that they did was, the time it took from them to start to finish to get a product out is obviously significantly a lot faster than they would had they gone through a normal cycle. And I think that it's not going to be a model that I don't think that the FDA is going to be changing how they do things, but I think that was a key, I don't say learning, but under a lot of pressure, there was the ability for them to actually produce something in much faster and actually demonstrate. And so now, after the COVID vaccine, they're looking at many other types of vaccines that can be used in oncology, which was their original use case to begin with. So that sort of accelerated their R&D and their development. Yeah.
On a one-time basis, though.
Yeah.
On a one-time basis.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So the GCC, there's a lot of innovation. We have PIF, we have a lot of sovereign wealth investments out of UAE, certainly out of the kingdom here. There's a lot of leadership, whether it's in golf with Live Golf, at PGA, one of the hottest trending topics in the world of business, as well as investment in electric vehicles, right, in energy and renewables and green, all of that. When it comes back to this healthcare, which I'd like to get the GCC is a rising set of powers now, both capital as well as market movement. Why not create a new body here? Why does it have to be leaning? And I'm saying, doesn't mean that everything with the FDA is wrong or EU medicines is wrong or WHO, but there's room for more, right? That's part of innovation.
So I think the best part in GCC is the very decisive leadership. They take a decision, they move on. People are empowered. If you see the ministry, we could do a project in 2 months what would have normally taken a year outside. So I think the times have changed, and you've seen the concept of livability. I think that's getting more and more popular. You're seeing soccer players coming in. You see the stress on well-being. So I think the leadership is very well aware, especially with the vision of 2030 and the Crown Prince, Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman, talking about health as one of the vital elements for people. And we are already in different places in NEOM, in Al Ula, which is getting like a destination. And if there is any event, the biggest part is a healthcare delivery model. And I think we are part of the big events which happens here. Before, people used to like to see police in an event, but now it's more healthcare workers that gives them the confidence. So I think the whole concept of well-being is on the center stage. New regulatory bodies are formed, and I think the approval systems have become very simpler. But what is now changing is the play of intellectual property. Before, it used to be the big pharma coming in, supplying the medicines, but now it's about bringing the IP on the ground, manufacturing locally, and I think a lot of things have changed post-COVID. It's the supply chain discussions, it's the supply continuity without shortages. So I think it's a very interesting time. The GCC moves very fast, especially countries like Saudi and UAE. They are very high on the radar.
This could be an area of cooperation,
For sure,
right?
and that's
for everybody's benefit, right? If Crown Prince, if MBS, I'm just positing this, and or MBZ and other leaders in the region, as you mentioned, you have a level of predictable leadership here. If that was an area that was made a top priority, do you believe that there's some kind of new capability that's possible with that? You're involved with clinical trials. That whole cycle could be accelerated.
So we do phase 3 trials with the big pharma, with US pharma companies. for very common conditions in this part of the world, like sickle cell and problems which are more inherent to this region. And before, a private player doing research is unheard of. So we believe that for us to sustain, two things are important, research and education. So what we do is we go and partner with the best companies like Oracle, like the big clinical institutions. We don't want the name. We want the IP. We want the know-how. We want the clinical leads. That's what we are looking for. So I think the partnerships models have also changed. And people want to see more on the ground. So if you see UAE, our leadership is also very clear on deliveries. They don't want anyone going out of the country like what it used to be. So it's more medical tourism. If you even come to Saudi, we want the beautiful places to visit. We can do a rehabilitation package, come visit the place. So people who could never travel, we can offer them to bring them here, see the place and go back. So the concept of care delivery has changed. It's innovating completely. And we just don't want to go for the low-hanging fruit. We're trying to bring in people who have never come here before because of medical needs. And that's what we are trying to do, bring them, dialyze them, take them around, feel new places, see new things. And that's the family culture you talked about. It's very prominent here. And hospitality, you see the hospitality in this part of the world is completely different. It's more of a cultural, traditional thing. So yeah, I think...
Nisa, Xi Jinping was here, I believe, December of 22, a little less than a year ago, among other things. There's a lot more acceleration of business commerce and cooperation across the regions back with China, with Asia. If there was some combination of not just medical tourism, if you will, but advancements in leading areas of regulatory and rapid trials and time to market for innovative new drugs and therapeutics, do you think that there would be a strong flow of people seeking that, whether it's coming from China and Asia, or would that be something that would there be resistance to out of this region?
I think that we've been working on that. I think, last time when I was at the Bloomberg conference last year, there are a few entities, including Memorial Sloan Catering. We're trying to work with U.S. and China to see if there could be more collaboration, and then on the regulatory side, how to make it simpler. But at the same time, I think going back to, and I'm sure if we could have some sort of more collaboration or some sort of, between the different FDAs, that could be also good. In fact, one of the things I'm also pushing is perhaps Hong Kong could be a good place to also set up their own regulatory.
Yeah.
Just because Hong Kong has great hospitals. And so, could we be doing, and we have been doing a lot of clinical trials, global trials for Big Pharma. And some of the phase 1 clinical centers are already recognized by China FDA. But I think going back to the breakthrough for technology for healthcare, in your last question, that's one of the reasons why we're one of the first investors in AI drug discovery. Going from Schrödinger to recursion to in silico. I think now we're actually seeing, because the thing is, it's so frustrating to see how long it takes to identify the target and develop a drug. And then, of course, the clinical development. But if we can actually expedite that, that's actually huge. And that's what we're seeing for AI drug discovery. We've also invested in a company in New York that is the Y Combinator for drug discovery. Because we feel that, hey, can we do that faster? Do we really need to have $100 million rounds? Or could we actually make it much cheaper and get to POC a lot faster? So lots of breakthroughs in the various areas.
That may be an actionable outcome of trends in healthcare here. And that may be one I think actually we can actually use some follow-up. FII is a great vehicle for that. Hong Kong, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, Singapore, some of the smaller but more powerful city-states, nation-states, and country, I think. So I think we have a great opportunity. These have been fantastic trends identified by the panel today, and it's an exciting time. So we look forward to reconvening on a future panel. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you everybody for participating. We look forward to executing on our trends in healthcare. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.